Isaiah chapter 40, verses 21 to 31. Isaiah 40. Do you not know? Have you not heard? Has it not been told to you from the beginning? Have you not understood since the earth was founded? He sits enthroned above the circle of the earth, and its people are like grasshoppers. He stretches out the heavens like a canopy and spreads them out like a tent to live in. He brings princes to naught and reduces the rulers of this world to nothing. No sooner are they planted, no sooner are they sown, no sooner do they take root in the ground than that he blows on them and they wither, and a whirlwind sweeps them away like chaff. To whom will you compare me? Or who is my equal? Says the Holy One. Lift your eyes and look to the heavens. Who created all these? He who brings out the starry host one by one and calls them each by name. Because of his great power and mighty strength, not one of them is missing. Why do you say, O Jacob, and complain, O Israel? My way is hidden from the Lord. My cause is disregarded by my God. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint.
Good morning, everyone. It's good to be here. I'm often asked to speak at the 9 o'clock service. Once a month I take the 9 o'clock service on the second Sunday. So do avoid those Sundays. I'm on the fourth Sunday when David is with you, and it's a far better job. Now, I thought I ought to dress appropriately today because Chris always dresses a bit like this. He has the trainers on, so I put the trainers on. I thought, so any of you who were missing Chris would feel, well, he's sort of here in the clothes. He's communing with some wildlife, I expect, in Scotland, I believe. So that's where he is today. And it's really good to speak to you. Now, we're living in sort of interesting times at the moment, and really, if you come to the 9 o'clock service, you will hear me say there's three types of people in this world. There's those that watch things happening, there's those that make things happen, and then those are wondering what's happening. And I think for many of us, we're probably in that situation at the moment. We're wondering what the heck is happening. And I fall into the category, in those three categories, of people that want to make things happen. I tend to be a sort of person, I like to make things happen. And actually, when we look in the Bible, right from the earliest days of Moses and many others, we saw Moses, he had to go and step into to cross the Red Sea. He had to actually make the plans, take the step, hold his rod up and cross the water. He had to do that first move. And God honored that. And God still does that today. When we sing some of the worship songs, Hide Me Under Your Wing, it's talking about the power of God, that we can rely on him in a quiet and firm way. And it's, it's quite interesting, really, because we all have times in our lives when particular actions of other people really impact us. And for me, I've been very fortunate in many ways. For those that know me, I live at a farm out at Cannington, and my father came there as a tenant in the early 50s, so we managed to buy the freehold of the farm, and we've been very privileged. Now, in 1984, I married Anne. I met her a couple of years before, and as soon as I saw her, I knew that was the girl I was going to marry, and she's put up with me ever since. And she's a very tolerant person. She's come to the stage now, we've been married 35 years, and she's resigned herself to the fact so she's probably going to have to keep me, you know what I mean? And she's great, Anne. But just before we were married in that year, in a time leading up to that when we were engaged, we were involved here in this church. I've been in this church all my life. In fact, I'm only one of, I believe, 2 people in this church who were at 4th Street Church before that, which is down on 4th Street on the right-hand side, halfway down. It's a shop now. And the only other person I think is Eileen Milton. There might be others, but I know Eileen Milton was there. Yes, you were there. I don't think anyone else was there. They're either long gone or whatever. And you were there. But in 1984, we were married. And before we were married, we were involved in a home group here in the church. And the minister at the time was Reverend Dick Shadd. They were only with us, Dick and Mary Shadd, for 18 months. And that was a transformational time for a number of people. People here, for people like Tom and Kerry Dougal, I believe. Yes, is that right, Tom? You get your nod there. And others. And had a big impact. Their ministry was very short. And unfortunately, Dick had, he ended up getting dementia, Alzheimer's, and actually had to give up the ministry and eventually passed away. Mary is still alive. And that was a really powerful time. And I went to Mission England. A few of you might have been to Mission England when it was up at Ashton Gate. Billy Graham came over. He came in the 50s. I don't remember that. It was before my time. But went there. And that was really impressive. 30,000 people in Ashton Gate. And a tremendous scene. Now, I was involved sort of loosely in a youth group which Simon Hillier was running at the time. And when that youth group, we decided to ask a friend, a husband of a friend of my wife, my wife's friend who went to school was Catherine, her husband was Paul, and he was a member of the Christian Police Association. And Paul came, we asked him to come and speak. They lived in Bath, come and speak to the young people. And during that evening, he spoke about his work with Billy Graham. They were bodyguards, the Christian Police Association were bodyguards and drivers for Billy Graham. And I don't know if you realise it, when Billy Graham spoke, he was speaking behind a bulletproof sheet of glass. You can't really see it, but it's a clear sheet of glass. He's actually behind, because even in those days, there were nutters in the world that wanted to do bad things. And so they were his protection team for the whole time he was here. And Paul shared how he became a Christian. He spoke to us at our farm, and there was a group of young people. And afterwards, Anne went up to the kitchens with Catherine. They just clearing out the coffee cups and that. And I was with Paul. And I said, Paul, I don't know what it is about you, but you have something. There's a generosity of spirit and something that I don't have, but you have. And Paul and Anne was having, this was before we were married, we were engaged at the time, and I was at home with my parents, and Anne was having a similar conversation simultaneously with Catherine. And at that point, Paul said, you really need to receive Jesus into your life and be filled with the Holy Spirit. Now, I've gone to church all my life. I consider myself a Christian. And actually, there that evening, they came together, 4 of us, they prayed for us. And at that point, it transformed our lives, quite significantly. And yet, I'd gone to church all my life. It was a transformational experience. And from that point, it was difficult. We were baptized by immersion, both Anne and myself, on Easter Sunday, 1985. And the church here was going through quite a trauma at the time. And we weren't too sure where to stay or go. And I really got to say to Dick and Margaret, they're here somewhere. Wherever they go. Yes, there they are. Dick challenged me. They knew we were looking at other places, and he said, look, you need to stay here and have an impact here. And that was a real challenge. I'm very thankful to Dick for that. And that actually really challenged me. And at a similar time to that, we were doing youth weekends up at Hill House, and one of the speakers there was talking about actually stickability, to stick it through. I've seen people come and go, but people that stick it out. And I didn't want to give the devil the satisfaction of actually leaving. I put my hand on the plough and I was going to stick it out through thick and thin. And over the years, things have moved forward. Jeff Armistead asked me to take on the youth work at the time, and that eventually grew for 20 years to work I'd done. Grapevine was very extensive. And in later years, I've given that up. And and focus on things within the church. And it's a thrill to see the things that have happened in more recent times where the church has taken a plunge with a cafe and other things. And those things have really transformed. But the things that really impacted Anne and myself was seeing people, our friends Paul and Kathy, people like Dick and Mary Shad, people in this church, and Tom and Kerry and others, many others, Adrian and Heather and many others, make very kind acts of kindness, of generosity, of friendship that was really meaningful. And at the time, when you do things like that, you think, does it make any real difference? And yet I think we don't often realize the impact we have. We often feel guilty because we're not out there evangelizing or preaching to people, but people do see Jesus in us. They do see it in our day-to-day lives, and actually when we live it out, and we don't have to sort of think, oh, I'm not preaching on the street corner or something, I'm not doing it right. It's actually, they see it in the living out of our lives. And one of the things, you might have come across it recently, over the last few years, there's a thing called 40 Acts. And it's a thing where they encourage people to do an act of kindness every day. And it happens particularly this time of year around Lent, where people do different acts of kindness, even tiny things like doing the washing up and that sort of thing. And in a few moments, we're going to show you a couple of videos. I'm going to show you one in a moment. And if you, once it's ready to go, you roll it, Henry, and fire at leisure. If we've got power. Yep, we have the technology. Have we got sound? We had sound just now. I'll carry on talking for a minute. When you've got sound, I'll stop speaking and rewind it, okay? You're obviously muting it somewhere. We had sound earlier. Have we got it? But just while he's sorting that out, is actually what we do every day makes a huge impact. We can't underestimate the impact we have on people. And we think, how can I make a change? When we look at people like Billy Graham and other famous people in the past, like Mother Teresa of Calcutta, was very famous a few years ago. I believe she's dead now.
Oh, I'll go and get my car, and she sort of accepted it. So I rushed off home.
Yeah. Get to the beginning. Technology is a wonderful thing, isn't it? It works.
I'd never gone out of my way to help a stranger before. I was walking home with my daughter in her pushchair, and I came across a lady who was really struggling to push a bike that had got a flat tyre. But the lady also had a crutch, and she was really, really, really struggling. And so I stopped and said, "Can I help you?" "No, I'm fine," she said. Sort of being very British, normally I would go, "Okay, yeah, that's fine," and go off. But I think because I was doing 40 acts, I was almost determined to give it another chance. She was trying to get to Halfords to get the tyre changed because it was her son's bike, and he needed it to get to work as his only form of transport. So I said, "Oh, I'll go and get my car," and she sort of accepted it. So I rushed off home, got my daughter in the car, drove to find her. She'd sort of struggled down the road about 10 metres. She said she didn't even believe I was going to come back for her. And it turned out that she'd actually recently come out of a women's refuge with her 2 children. And so she'd had a really, really tough time. And, you know, I'd have really loved to kind of, looking back, I'd have loved to sort of talk to her a bit more about Jesus. I didn't do any of those things. I just kind of made excuses. "Oh, I'm not normally this nice, but I'm doing this thing called 40 Acts. And just said, you know, just try and do something kind for somebody every day. We got to Halfords, she got out of the car, and I kind of sat there and felt very strange, really, as I was reflecting on it, because I've never really gone out of my way to help a stranger before. And she came out of the shop and she said, "Oh, it's going to be 10 or 15 minutes, so you just go." And I was like, no, it's fine, I've got nothing to do, I'll drop you home. And she said to me, "Nobody's ever done anything like this for me before." And as I sat in the car, just my daughter in the back, just reflecting while she was in the shop, I thought that was just crazy. Like, it cost me so little. It was like half an hour of my time and a couple of pounds in petrol. And yet to her, it was such a big thing. I don't know if I'd have come across her any other way. I don't know if I'd have started chatting to a woman who's sort of recently come out of a refuge. I don't know if I'd have been in that position had it not been for kind of being determined to do something nice today. I love 40 Acts, partly because I don't have to give up things that I like, like chocolate and things, but it's really nice how inventive you can be with being generous. Some of the things are so easy, but some of them are quite out of my comfort zone, and it's lovely to be able to try different things and challenge myself in different ways. You know, I love God's extravagance in his generosity, and I think I probably used to be a bit tight, and I think, you know, stepping out little ways and being generous, it's actually a really lovely journey.
It shows the importance there of that young woman just sharing her experience of actually how those little things can impact someone. We don't know other people's situation and where they're at that time. For that young woman, the person she helped was in a way being helped for the first time. She hadn't had anything like that before. The impact was massive. And I think we can underestimate what God can do through us. We all think, it happens with other people. And actually, it's just a matter. So you listen to this one, and this will blow your mind. Carry on. If we got sound. You away?
Generous, fantastic, loving, compassionate guy, a fantastic dad, a beautiful husband, and an inspirational head teacher. David was such a giver. He gave to everybody, and I used to have to share him, and I was cross. I didn't like to share. You know, he was my husband. I was a young mum. The children were young. I wanted him to come home, and I remember the conversations with him going, no, but I've just got to finish this, and I've just got to do this, and you know, this is happening tomorrow, and this child needs me, and you know, I've got to ring this parent, and now I sort of understand more that I had to share him. He was one incredible guy, and he needed to touch people. He needed to, you know, connect with and inspire people. And we weren't allowed just to have him. That wasn't fair. So Dave was diagnosed with cancer 12 years ago. He had breast cancer, and he had a mastectomy, and he had intensive chemo and radiotherapy. And then they told him that he was in remission. David worked throughout that period, so he would have his chemo and go to school, which was phenomenal. You know, he'd throw up in the waste paper basket. So he worked, and I think it was afterwards that it sort of hit him that he had been so ill. He knew he wasn't, but in his head he was immortal. He was never going to have any affliction. He wasn't going to die. It wasn't something that even crossed his mind. And I think his belief in God was challenged at that time because, you know, it didn't feel fair. It felt very unfair. When the cancer came back a second time and had gone to his chest, lungs and spine, the diagnosis was terminal, and it was a much harsher diagnosis. But David's attitude was so different. He was at peace somehow, and he accepted it. He wasn't angry, he wasn't bitter. He would say to me, the cancer is a blessing, which I would find very challenging. But he said it's given me a new perspective, and I realised how lucky I was and how blessed I am. And he even said, his words were that if life was a 3-course meal, then his dessert was his favourite bit, which I found extraordinary. But he felt very focused, very determined. He wanted to spend that time inspiring people, helping people, and giving thanks to God. Dave was always thankful. I think that was one of the gifts that I will take with me from him. He thanked everybody always, and he felt it was always important to recognise people and to give thanks. And when he was diagnosed, when he had his terminal diagnosis, it galvanised him into writing letters, and he felt an urgency to actually put pen to paper and thank people for what they had done for him in his life. And it was like a mission. He needed to write and thank everybody. And he would sit endlessly writing these beautiful letters on parchment paper, beautifully written, with all of his heartfelt thanks, which was just so lovely. We weren't allowed to see them. They were all sealed, and I wasn't allowed to give them to anyone till after his death. David's faith towards the end gave him an enormous amount of joy and satisfaction and happiness and nourishment and fulfillment, and he celebrated life. David died nearly a year ago, and he was insistent that he wanted to plan his Thanksgiving service, which he did meticulously, and part of that was he wrote words to be read out. And I'd like to read to you just a section of the words that he wrote. So David wrote, "How can anyone say that I've not been blessed? I have an incredible community of friends and family. I've had the greatest job on this planet, seeing boys and girls develop intellectually and socially throughout my career. It wasn't work at all. It was my joy. And I hope I brought some of that joy into their lives, as they always did mine. I've had it all: my sports, my art, my music, my maths, my family, my friends and colleagues, my schools, my work, my church, and my growth in my relationship with God."
That's right, and at the end of the reading it says, "Do you not know, have you not heard, the Lord is an everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary. His understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow weary and tired, and young men stumble and fall. But those that hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." I think that gives us something to think about, that God can use us in the most ordinary situations. The lady there was relating about her husband, just an ordinary sort of guy, an ordinary sort of job, teacher and that, and how God used him powerfully. And he can use each of us powerfully. We don't underestimate what God can do in small ways. And the first step of actually just sharing those bits is the hardest, but as we step out in that, God can use us, whoever we are, and we don't have to be great speakers or anything else, but it speaks powerfully to those around us. Amen.